bring on Megan Mahoney. Megan, welcome. So glad to have you here. If it's okay, I'm going to start with a little bit of a bio for you. Megan actually grew up here in New Mexico in the South Valley of Albuquerque and has actually been fascinated by honeybees ever since working with our previous speaker, Dr. Marla Spivak, in 2003. Her enthusiasm for bees, beekeepers, and bee breeding has grown over time and inspired her to build up a repertoire of beekeeping experiences across the US. I think when I first heard of you, Megan, you were in Hawaii, which sounds like pretty good duty, actually. So Megan has invested more than a decade of work inside the commercial bee industry, with past experience working for queen producers in Northern California, leading a tech team for the Bee Informed Partnership, which we participate with as well, and working as a technician for the Varroa Sensitive Hygiene breeding program on the Big Island in Hawaii. Recently, in 2019, she and her partner, Ross Klett, founded Mahoney Bees and Queens, a company specializing in instrumental insemination, breeder queens, and cell production. They currently manage a migratory Carnolian-based breeding program, in addition to helping maintain about 2,000 colonies. What? They travel with the bees, probably not all 2,000 colonies, between Southeast Texas and Central North Dakota. So it's my understanding that, Megan, despite all your travels, you still consider Albuquerque to be your home. So we're so proud to have you here today. Thank you so much. And you can start sharing your screen at any moment.
Okay, thanks guys. And I'm so happy to be invited back to New Mexico Beekeepers Association. Like Stephen said, Albuquerque and New Mexico is near and dear to my heart, although I'm not too sad about missing the blizzard this weekend. I'm here in Southeast Texas right now, where we have all of our bees, and I will start sharing my screen. I'm not, let's see. Okay. You guys see that? I hope everybody can see that.
Yes.
If not, let me know.
Yes, we can.
But yeah, as Stephen said, I was one of the lucky ones to have met Marla when I was 19. I was on a university exchange program from UNM, and I decided with seemingly random choices to go to Minneapolis and St. Paul, and I kind of just accidentally fell into the bee lab there. I was actually taking an introduction entomology course, and we were assigned a self project to do research on an insect of our choosing, and I randomly chose honeybees. I had no knowledge of them previously, and I went to the library, the university library, and started looking at all the books, and was just astounded by the number of books and magazines and information, and it just opened up a whole new world to me that I never knew had existed. And so Marla eventually hired me to help for around a year there, or 2 years, and basically from the moment I was able to see inside a beehive, I was just hooked. And so that was 20 years ago, and I've been working with bees ever since in lots of different capacities. I fell in love with a commercial beekeeper's son, Ross Klett, and now 20 years down the track, we are helping manage a family-run small commercial bee operation. So we do run around 2,000 colonies, which sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but there are other commercial producers that have many more colonies than that. So in the commercial world, I think we're considered reasonably small. So we do operate on a migratory basis. We spend about 8 months of the year in Southeast Texas. We bring the bees down in the wintertime and we overwinter them here. And in the springtime, we specialize in raising queen cells for commercial production. And when I say commercial production, I'm talking about a lot of queen cells. We last year made over 50,000 cells for sale. So my goal with this presentation was to kind of create a practical how-to guide for people that are wanting to learn more about queen raising and queen breeding. And so there it is a technical guide. So bear with me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have afterwards. But I just kind of wanted to share with you what our personal model is and what it has been working for us for the past decades, actually. So with that, I'll show you kind of the general layout of our priorities with our bee population. What's interesting about this work is that every year is a little bit different. For example, in 2021, we sent some bees to California for pollination for the almond bloom. And so last year, queens were still our top priority. Queens and cell production make up over 50% of our income. Second to queens is honey. The problem with honey is that it's not as reliable as queens because it's so dependent upon climatic conditions. There can be lots of rain or no rain or bad weather. And so honey, while we are more than happy to get any honey that we can make, it's not very predictable. So that's why as a business model for us, queens are the most important part of our business. And also whatever queens we produce, we use to requeen our own operation. And so the queen breeding aspect is very important for on a population level for productive colonies. So anyway, last year, queens were our top priority, pollination was second, and then all the rest of the bees were used for making the queen machine run, making splits, and producing honey. And this year, we decided not to send any bees to California. And so our main priority is queens again, and the rest of the hives will be used for support and honey. Now, as a part of the queens, like Steve said, in addition to running our family operation, which is called Clet Beekeeping, my partner and I founded our own business in 2019, and it's called Mahoney Bees and Queens, like my last name. And we specialize in instrumental insemination. So there is a little factor, a subset of the queens that are II queens, which is why they're included in this pyramid graph. So while I wanted to talk mostly about queen production and queen raising and the technicalities of that, I just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of an update, I guess, on what Mahoney Bees and Queens breeding program looks like, just sort of a basic model of what we're doing. We are doing a selective queen breeding program on a population level inside of the larger migratory commercial operation. So not every hive that we have is part of the breeding program, but we do run a satellite population within this larger number of colonies. And that's why I'm playing with the idea of calling the line satellite selects, because it is a satellite population inside a larger migratory operation. If anybody has any other good names that they've thought of, let me know. I'm open to other suggestions. We were awarded a SARE grant, a farmer rancher SARE grant in 2020. And this money was used towards developing a viable breeding population of carniolan bees and using artificial insemination to produce sustainable breeding stock. So there are some advantages to migratory beekeeping for the breeding program. because it gives us a larger pool to work with. The more colonies that you have to select from, the higher your selection power is. One thing I really like about it too is that moving the colonies around can provide a useful filter. Because, for example, if you're going to be moving them anyway, you can choose the ones that you like best out of the yard and move them together. So you can kind of use that to place productive colonies that you've chosen or selected in a place where you can produce more drones for yourself and things like that. So I call it 50 Shades of Gray, my breeding program, kind of jokingly, but because we are selecting for the black gray color of the carniolan bees, it is astonishing what the spectrum of colors of gray there can be with the bees. As a general model, the breeding program is based on the Laidlaw Page closed population breeding program. And the idea of this is to use multiple mother lines as your basic II queens. So these are represented on the left there in blue. And once you select out the colonies that perform the way you want them to, those get kind of graduated to breeders, star breeders. And for here in this example, I have 12 colonies shown. But if you were to imagine that each colony had a different mother line, we would take at least 5 to 10 daughters in the form of cells from each breeder. And you can see on the right how that population, taking even 10 daughters from each breeder mother, creates 40. If I were to take 10 daughters from this palette of 4, that creates 40 full-size production hives in the population. So the base model is 35 to 50 breeders. Right now, I have about 100. And my personal goal is 200. So I've been using the past 3 years to kind of build up this diverse carniolan population that I can select off of. So as I put together a little kind of animation, so just bear with me, and this is probably the most complicated part. But I just wanted to show you how it works within a larger population. So for example, we start here with the potential breeders. They're blue again. These are the inseminated population. And just because they're inseminated doesn't make them breeders. But once they go through our selection protocol, which is multifaceted, and that's a different talk. But we do find some star performers within our potential breeders inseminated population. And so those become then the proven breeders that we actually propagate from. So these two populations are interchangeable. I get the proven breeders from the potential breeders that are selected. And then those proven breeders, we take cells off of those and track those mother line cells in a satellite open mated F1 population. And like I said, we try to take at least 5 to 10 daughters off of each proven breeder just to keep our F1 population diverse, and so that it represents multiple mother lines at any given time. And we do this also to get an idea of how our customers' bees would perform, because if when we're running them for production as open mated, we get a good idea of how well they survive on a population level, how much honey they make, if their propensity for brood disease and things like that. So again, those in orange represent kind of the satellite population, and those are run within the CLET larger general population represented in green. So what's kind of cool, and how this all goes back full circle within a migratory operation, is that out of the F1 population, the orange ones, and the green population, we inevitably choose colonies that are star performers. And what's great about this is that when we start raising cells in Texas in February, we pull out the star performers from each group. So you can see here the orange starred are represented by the Mahoney bees and queens F1 population, proven breeders, or selected out of the population. Also, the blue is with the actual inseminated proven breeders, and from the general pool of the collet population. And so in this way, bringing the star performers in as breeders for a larger breeding pool for the collet cell production season is a good way to maintain diversity and pull many different populations together as star performers. So the cells, so all of these pieces are interchangeable and they all act as a full circle. And that's what's, I think, really beautiful about this system. Each population can lead to the other one, and you can use all of them as a bank or a buttress for your genetic stock in the form of drones or virgins. So again, this is a 2,000 hive total-ish. And so the numbers, the number of colonies really help move the breeding program along, because it's not like we're selecting off of a single hive. We're actually selecting off of a breeding population. So anyway, that's the general idea for the breeding program. And I have a whole nother talk on that we can talk about at another time. But today I really wanted to focus more on the technical how-to guide of queen raising. And there are many different ways you can do it, but today I'm going to tell you how we do it, reasonably successfully do it. So basically, the basic gist is that there are only two kinds of cell builders. There's a queen right builder and a queenless builder. And for ease of identification, the queen right builder is going to be represented by Queen Elizabeth, yellow, and the queenless is going to be represented by Jean-Luc Picard, the red. So in order to have a queen right builder, you have to have a combination of a queenless and a queen right. And so that's why I have Queen Elizabeth dressed up as Captain Picard to signify that you have to disguise the queen somehow in order to raise queens in a queen right system. So I want to start with queen right because that's what we do. And it's also, I think, a little more technical, but there are advantages to the system. This is a picture of how we set up our cell yard. We keep each cell builder, each individual cell builder on a hive stand. And we do that because it's easier to manipulate the hive on the stand. And you could do this in another way. You could use a dolly in the field, or you could physically move the boxes. But this is just the way we do it, and it works really well for us. Last season, we had over 250 cell builders set up in the queen yard. When you have that many colonies, and even sometimes if you don't have that many colonies in a yard, robbing can be an issue. So I just want to caution everyone to be aware of robbing. On the right here, these are the robbing screens that we had custom made, which we can roll over our whole working area. We can slide down that screen at the front and kind of create our own little screen working area. On the left, that's Dr. Katie Lee, one of Marla's students. We were working in North Dakota this summer, and we just used a pop-up screen tent. And it worked really well because robbing, don't underestimate robbing. It can really shut you down. So I'm having trouble seeing the top of my slides. Let's see if I can move it. So basically there are three ways to disguise the queen. And that's why she's pictured there in her Picard disguise. And these are all physical ways. to disguise the queen. And if you're going to use a queen right system, you have to disguise the queen somehow to start the queen cells. So this cloak board, maybe some of you guys have seen this before. This is basically a queen excluder that sits in between the boxes. And when you want to take away the queen pheromone or disguise the queen, you slide in this piece of metal to block the pheromone transfer between the colonies. This double screen in the middle, this is what we use. And believe it or not, if there is these double screens are placed so that there's a distance between the screens. And because the bees can't touch each other through the double screen, they also cannot share pheromones. So we prefer to use the double screen method because it allows the colony to keep its heat. Whereas the cloak board it kind of cuts off airflow. So we use the double screen. The third way is to physically manipulate the boxes. For example, you could take the queen right section and put it into a nuke and then graft into the queenless section. Or you could take the queen right section or the queenless section and graft into it. But then you would have to physically manipulate it, recombine it at another time. So those are the three ways to disguise the queen. Let's see. Remember, drones are important. In our breeder colonies, we do run drone comb to propagate drones that we want in our population. So a queen right system, a sample. Now, like I said, there are many different ways that you can do this, but today I just want to go through our system and how it works for us. And there's going to be 6 steps. So the first step is to set up the colony. So you choose a strong queen right colony and you bring it in and put it on your hive stand. This is our hive stand here. And you want to take note of where the entrance is at all times, because you're using the entrance and the field force flying back and forth to your benefit. And you want a strong colony, so you're going to have a lot of bees flying back and forth in and out of the entrance. So you bring that in and you clean up. It gives you a good opportunity to clean up the hive. You want to make sure you scrape around the top bars and stuff to make sure that when you're pulling out frames, you're not going to roll a queen or smash a bunch of bees with a burr comb. And it gives you a good opportunity to really look through the hive, look for queen cells, look for disease, kind of just live with the hives is what we call it. And when you do that, you find the queen and paint her, give her a paint marking for an easier identification in the future. Because usually with a queen right system, you're going to be using this colony over and over again to raise cells. This is not usually a one-time thing. So we paint the queen so that we can find her again. And we put her in the bottom box. There she is, in the bottom box. And we set that up with at least 1 frame of honey, some pollen, and as much brood as they have. And you put a queen excluder above that queen right system. And in the top box, you're going to leave some space because we're going to graft into that box eventually. And so you're going to leave a little bit of space here for the graft to go in the future. So the queen is on the bottom with most of the brood. The top box, you're going to position a feeder, some honey. If you have extra brood, you can place it up here. But the most important thing is that there is no queen in the top box. So that's step 1. This is an example of how we do our hive manipulations. You can see with this hive stand on the bottom, the entrance is this way, and you can slide that colony over and put another bottom board down and take the top box down and set it on that other bottom board. When you do that, then you can prepare the colony for graft. And I can't see myself anymore. There I am. Yeah, so that's how you prepare so you put the formerly queenless portion on the bottom. You leave the queen right portion over here and you find the queen. Always find the queen first. Put her in a cage or a safe spot so that you're not going to lose her. And the queenless portion on the bottom, you want to add in, if you don't already have brood in there, you can add in sealed brood from the bottom box. You can shake in frames of young bees off of the brood from the queen right portion, making sure you don't put the queen in. And you absolutely want to add a frame of pollen. If you do not have enough pollen, you will not be able to raise quality cells. These blue lines here represent the graft that's going to go in next to the pollen. So after you're done setting up your bottom box, you may have to add bees, more bees from somewhere else. But if you have a strong enough colony to start with, oftentimes you don't have to add any bees. Now you take the queen excluder off and you replace that with a double screen. So now your colony is ready for graft. You have the queenless portion on the bottom. You have a nice frame of pollen. You have some brood, you have food, and you have no queen. The queen is on top and there's a double screen in between the two boxes. Step 3, then you place the graft. And I'll show you what we use to graft further in the presentation. But once you have the colony set up to graft, you graft and then place the graft. And you place it in between the pollen and the brood, or in between two broods, or in between two pollens even. And what's neat about this system is that you use this field force that's coming into the colony to help fill that bottom box, so that the bees really, really want to start cells. They really feel like, oh, there's so many bees, we're kind of crowded in here, and they want to raise those cells. They feel it's almost like inducing a swarm situation. Now that's why I had previously the queen dressed up in Picard's clothing, because the queens have to be started in a queenless environment. So even though it's a queen right system, the queen is in the top box. And because the bees cannot touch between the two boxes, the bees that are in the bottom box feel like they're queenless. And that's why they raise the cells. So you must always start them in a queenless environment. In our case, we leave them in that box for 48 hours. Okay, and this is the most complicated step. We call it the reverse. And so when the graft is in there, it looks like this. The queenless part was on the bottom, the queen right portion was on top, and you had that double screen in between them. So again, you want to slide the colony over. You want to put another bottom board down and take the queen right portion now from the top and put it back to where it originally was on the bottom. So it'll start gaining the field force again. And also at that time, you want to find the queen and you want to switch the frames of brood out from the two boxes. So in the cell portion, the queenless portion, you had sealed brood. You want to take those two frames out and switch them with two open frames from the queen right section. And that's to draw young nurse bees up around the graft. So at this time, you take out the double screen, you replace it with the queen excluder, and you leave it like that for the cells to finish, which is step 5. So the cells are finishing above the queen excluder now. The young brood, you brought up the queenless portion around the graft. It's also at that time that you do the reverse, it's a good time to check and see how well your graft took. Because after 48 hours, you should have a pretty good idea of what your graft take is. One important thing to note here is you do not, under any circumstances, want that queen to get up into your finishing cell box. And so it's a very good idea to check the integrity of your queen excluder. If there's even like one little bent bar, the queen can squeeze up there and there can be a disaster. So That's why the queen here says that the cells can be finished in a queenless or a queen right system as long as the queen cannot access the cells. And so these are photos of what happens if a queen does access the cells. And this is a virgin queen or a mated queen can do this. So it's really important to check the colony for cells, rogue cells, and also make sure that queen excluder is intact. After the cells are finished, step 6 is to actually pull the cells before they emerge. So to reduce confusion, I'm counting day 1 as the day that an egg is laid. And so you would graft on day 4 here, but we generally pull our cells on day 13 or day 14 from graft. Because as you can see, the queen usually emerges like 15.5 or 16 days, but you definitely want to start pulling the cells before they start emerging so that you can use them in your colonies. End product, nice looking cells. So you can get very nice looking cells from a queen right system. It just requires a little more planning and more hive manipulation. So now that you've gotten the queen right system down, I wanted to go into the queenless system, which I think is a more simple version of raising cells. And if you were a beekeeper that only wanted to raise cells one time, you might consider a queenless system over a queen right system. But we'll go through the advantages and disadvantages at the end. So remember, you have to start cells in a queenless system. And the key to quality cells is plenty of pollen and young bees. So the easiest way to start a queenless system is either removing a queen from an already strong queen right colony. You could take her and make a little nuke with her. Or you can, if you have support hives, you can take brood, you find the queen in all of them, you take brood out and you build a queenless unit from support hives. And you can also add more bees if you need to. And what I like to do is make up a queenless unit before I graft, like a few days before, because then the brood that you add into your queenless unit has the time to emerge. And when you come back a few days later, you can look for cells. And you also have all these nice young bees that have just emerged out of the brood. So it can create like a really nice woolly unit to graft into. In Texas, we're lucky enough to have diverse pollen sources in the spring when we're trying to raise cells. I know New Mexico, you guys get some pretty nice pollen flows too. But you have to have pollen to raise quality cells. So generally speaking, the queenless unit is the same as a queen right system. It's the same principles. You need lots of young bees. You need plenty of pollen and food. You're gonna place your graft in between, next to the pollen, in between brood, if there's brood. There's no reverse required, which is great, but you must check for rogue queen cells, because queenless unit cell raising, they're going to be much more inclined to raise their own cells. So this is generally kind of what I have in mind. If I'm going to graft on day 4, I try to set up my queenless unit a few days previous to that. And then I put my graft in, I come back in a couple of days, check for rogue cells and give them another little shot of feed. And then, so I can sleep better at night, I check for cells again before I'm going to pull the cells on day 13. Again, finished product, nice looking cells. You have the same product with both systems. They're just different ways of doing it. So pros and cons, the queen right system. What's nice about this is that you have a queen that's constantly laying. So it's constantly boosting the population of your unit. So you have less potential to have to add more bees if you have a nice queen in there that's just laying. They're also, because there is a queen in there, they're less likely to build cells in the queenless portion. You still have to check, but they're less likely. And in this system, you can kind of, with box hive manipulation, you can continually use it. So once you get into the flow of it, you can just continually manipulate it and raise graft after graft after graft. The problem is that there is a lot more hive manipulation, and it's a lot to keep track of. And still, if the colony gets weak, you might have to boost it. The Queenless system, it's kind of a graft and go, less hive manipulation. You can easily set it up in your apiary, but you have to, it's not a sustainable unit on its own. You have to continually add bees or brood. And you have to patrol for rogue cells. And then again, once you're done raising cells, you have to either add a queen to it, or a cell, or recombine it with another colony to make it a viable unit. So those are the two basic methods. I did want to talk with you about a couple other things. When you're raising cells, it's important to have the right age larva. And one way that I can achieve that is by breeder colony management. So here I have an excluder frame that's positioned in the hive so that I have 3 frames that the queen has access to only, these 3 frames. And so this middle frame, I cycle in and out on certain dates and times. And I keep track of that with little numbers that I write onto the top bars so that I always know what age the larva is going to be on that frame. So there are lots of ways you can do it. This is just the way I do it. Of course, you always want to find and protect the queen first when manipulating frames. I use a little hair roller cage that I carry on my belt, and it works great for me. That way I always know where she is. I know she's not going to jump off the frame. I know I'm not going to squish her. I use the Chinese tool for grafting. Actually, my family, my partner, they use brazing rods that are like welding rods that they've fabbed up as little hooks. But I learned with the Chinese tool, and that's what I still use and find the most successful. I actually recently found this new style of Chinese tools on eBay, and they have a silicone plunger instead of a bamboo plunger. And I just love them. They're the best grafting tools I've ever used. You can sometimes find them on Amazon or on eBay, and look for this little golden seal on it. I find them to be a lot more durable than the ones you can buy at Man Lake. Again, you're going to want to graft on day 4. So I'm counting day 4 in the life cycle. So day 0, I would set up my breeder colony. Day 1, she would lay the egg. Day 2, it's still an egg standing up. Day 3, the egg kind of starts to tilt at a 45-degree angle. And by day 4, you have a tiny little larva that's sitting in a pool of royal jelly at the bottom of the cell. Generally speaking, you can graft anywhere within like a 24-hour window of day 4, but the younger the better. And this is important because it allows you to estimate how long it will take for your queen to emerge. You can imagine if you were grafting an older larva, like a day 5, or even a huge one, day 6, you're going to have the queen emerge earlier. We use the JZBZ base mount cell cups, and it works great for us. Not all cells are created equal. This depends largely upon your food in the colony and the amount of nurse bees available. And robust population is very important here. Again, you have to have plenty of nurse bees to raise quality cells. So you want to make sure those colonies are really woolly and have lots of young bees. And you can see this is actually checking back on my day on 48, my day 48 hours later, day 2. So it's a good opportunity to look. You can see the little pools of royal jelly at the tops of the cells, and they start building the little wax cups. And so it's a good opportunity. At that time, the cells aren't super fragile, so you can really look and see what your take was. Oops. Now for us, because we're raising like 50,000 cells and we're crazy busy, usually from the end of February through the middle of May. If we didn't write things down on a calendar, it would be a disaster. So even if you're just raising one round of cells, queen math, as we call it, can be kind of confusing. So I encourage you to plot it out on a calendar. Otherwise, you can very easily lose track. We candle our cells before we pack them up and sell them. And candling, while it is a technical skill, it's fairly easy to learn. For example, this cell, you can see that it's still a larva in there. And so this is a cell that would not be viable. Sometimes, for whatever reason, not all of the cells, I mean, usually most of the time, most of the cells are fine, but sometimes for whatever reason, the larvae don't fully develop, or maybe they fall off the royal jelly, or maybe they have some other issue. So if you can even eliminate a few of those cells down the road, it's going to save you bees and it's going to save the time. So we just hold the cells up to a bright light and kind of look at it. And sometimes we gently move it around and you can see the pupa moving inside that cell cup. For example, some of the things I've seen upside down queens before. So or a breached queen. So obviously this queen would never be able to chew out of the cell. She would not be able to emerge. I've seen queens with damaged wings. That can be caused by temperature swings when you're handling the cells, or if you drop the cells or something like that, that can cause wing damage. Also, I wanted to find a picture, but I have seen twice before double queens inside the cells. So it's always a good idea to candle. It doesn't really take very long. And these are kind of what healthy looking virgins can look like. Of course, I'm using the virgins for my own breeding program, but you could emerge them and look at them and kind of get an idea of what your cells will look like. So we do once we pull the cells at day 13, we do keep them in an incubator. I really love this incubator from incubatorwarehouse.com. It's just like a little unit that you can buy for $80. I think it's called an IncuKit. And I just fabbed up an old refrigerator. It works great. And I found out this past year that incubators do need ventilation. It's very important to maintain temperature. And they are variable. So it's a good idea to keep it a little cooler than brood nest temperature in case the incubator gets hotter. You run less risk of overheating your cells. So I always keep my IncuKit set to a certain temperature, but I also keep a separate thermometer inside as a secondary measurement. Once we pull the cells and candle them, we pack them up into these cell trays that we made. It's a good idea to keep them upright and minimize jostling or movement. So this one on the left is the style that we use. We can fit 70 cells in each tray, but I have seen beekeepers use other things like this. So it's a good, they're fragile. So the less you can agitate them, the better. Cell protectors also help with that. They help keep the cell, the soft wax of the cell walls protected. And also if you're using them to place in colonies, it does offer some protection from a rogue queen that might be in the colony that you didn't know about, either a virgin or a mated queen. For example, because we're commercial producers, this is how we pack up our cells for delivery or sale, and transport them from one incubator to another. So we have warm water bottles with all of our candled cells labeled with the date. You can see this says Tuesday cells. And as long as you can keep them at a reasonable temperature and upright and not agitated too much, you can transport cells. Which brings me to another project that I've been working on this year, the cell shipping trial. With Project APISM and Oregon State University, and I put together a proposal for trying to ship cells across the country. My colleague Ellen Koppitzhofer works at Oregon State University, and we worked really hard on this project all last year. And we're hoping to continue it this year and get some more data. And I won't go into all the details, but the basic gist is that I took 3 different ages of cells from the same mother. So these were all sister queens. And I randomized the ages in a shipping box, added the same amount of bees and water and candy, and shipped half of them to Ellen in Oregon. And I kept half of them back. And we both put them in our respective incubators. She received the shipment through UPS, overnight shipping. And so I kept half the cells, and we both had incubators set at the same temperature. And we set up video cameras to track their emergence times to see if there were any differences, and also just to see if the cells that I sent her were viable after overnight shipment. So again, we came up with some pretty nice illustrations. Chris Hedstrom from Oregon State University designed this. And he also designed this graphic for what the amendments to the shipping box would look like if you were shipping cells. So we put temperature trackers in there, and it tracked the temperatures every 10 minutes. And we monitored the temperatures over time for each shipment. I shipped her 15 shipments, I think, maybe 7 from Texas and 8 from North Dakota. And as a result, they also did cell drop tests, horrifyingly. So here's a video of our colleague. Dropping those poor cells. We wanted to, we found out from UPS that the conveyor belts at UPS are set to about 4 feet high, and that there were two different places that they could be dropped. So we wanted to simulate what would happen to the cells and if they would survive if they were dropped off of the UPS conveyor belts. Anyway, as a result of all this data, which is now accessible to anybody, we did publish a guide to shipping honeybee queen cells, and it's available for free. You can download it from Project APISM. I put the address up at the top there. And again, it was only a year project, so we were really happy to get the information we had in a guide put together in such a short time. There's a lot of good information in there. And we will likely amend it in the coming years. But it was a lot of work. It was also a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. So I encourage you, if you're interested in cells, cell handling, or cell shipping, to check it out. So great, now after you have all these cells and you raised all these cells and you've got your cell raisers, professionally, how to do it, what are you going to do? Well, the whole point is to get good queens out of it. And so properly cared for queens increases your chances of success. And that falls in line even with cell handling and temperature and things like that. So anything that you can do along the line to reduce your risk is going to increase your chances of success. So I just wanted to show some pretty pictures of nice looking retinues around queens. These are all well cared for happy queens, it looks like. In the summertime, when we go to North Dakota, in addition to running for a honey crop, we also do a limited number of mated queens. And we just make our nukes into 5-frame colonies, 5-frame nukes. And we catch the queens out of that. You can see this is a daughter off of one of my breeders, kind of a caramel, darky looking carniolan queen, cross queen. So just to reiterate, I mean, cell handling is really important and cell care, but also queen care. So you want to limit the amount of time that the queens are away from other bees and away from food and water. I say less than an hour for sure. You also want to keep them warm and dry. These are just some examples of banking frames and how we bank our queens in queenless units. And we try to keep our queens banked for as little time as possible. In this picture, actually, you can see that I have extra large holes drilled out in my cages so that I can fit a cell cup. And so for the breeding program, this is how I sometimes emerge my cells. So I can take my queen cells, emerge them in the incubator or in a queenless nuke. And then I can get a good idea of what my virgin queens will look like before I inseminate them. And I guess that's it. So as Captain Picard says, keep calm and make it so. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer some.
Megan, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So again, I'm the lucky one because I get to ask my questions first. So I love the way you describe the overall process, on a big scale, but for some of us who are just trying to get into queen breeding on a very small scale, do you have any just quick recommendations of how a new queen breeder might go about that in terms of which system works best, which of the methods that you talked about would work best if you were just trying to raise, let's say, a handful of queens?
Personally, when I was doing a handful of queens, I really think the queenless system is the easiest system, but you have to have enough bees to support a strong queenless unit. Because even if you're only going to raise 10 cells or 20 cells, you still have to have a good amount of pollen, young bees, in order to make that happen. So for example, if you only have one hive, you could pair up with another beekeeper and combine resources to make a queenless cell raiser. And that's my advice is to use the queenless system and get started with that. And then you can kind of gauge how your success is. And as you want to graft more, you could perhaps graduate to more cells in a queenless unit or a queen right system.
Okay, great. Teresa Beck wants to know, why did you choose carniolans to breed?
That's a good question. I chose carniolans, well, because they're beautiful and I really love them, but also I felt like it would be a harder first choice. My goal is actually to also do an Italian line. And from the selection process for the black, I think the black is harder to maintain. And so I wanted to start with the hardest thing first and try to work my way back to yellow. Also, I had the good fortune to be good friends with Sue Kobe. And Sue Kobe, for those of you who don't know her, runs the New World Carniolan program, or she used to. And so I was able to go up there for an internship in 2019. And she traded me in breeding stock and germplasm. So it was a really good jumpstart for my own program. And also, more than that, there's also a market for the carniolan. It's a smaller market, but there is a demand for it, and there are not that many people that are maintaining a carniolan line. So those are the reasons why I chose it.
That's great. Okay, Melanie Kirby, who you know, has asked the question, when you switch out brood frames between Picard and Lizzie after 48 hours, do you try to put larger larva, open brood, or any open brood? If any open brood age, do you worry that the frames of those young larvae will compete with royal jelly needs from the nurse bees that are also feeding the grafted queen larva?
Good question. For us, we use any open brood. Sometimes we even put eggs up there. And more than what we think is more than competing for food, it actually draws more young bees up to the graft frames so that it can keep the graft frames at a more constant temperature. And because the young bees are up there, they're going to be right next to the queen cells, so they're going to be more likely to feed them too. That's the general idea with our system.
Okay, thank you. Robert Buster is asking, how and when do you integrate treatment for mites during the process of rearing queens?
That's a good question. I do not recommend treating the hives while you're raising queens. It can affect your cell take significantly, depending on what treatment you use. So we try to treat before the queen raising process, before or after. And you're going to have much higher success if you start out with colonies that are low in mite levels before you start raising queens.
Okay, great. That makes good sense. Melanie also wants to know that you mentioned airflow in the incubator. Do you do anything specific for maintaining humidity?
You know I put on that slide that humidity is a factor, and I know that's ambiguous, but that's because I have mixed opinions. I've heard to us, it doesn't really seem like humidity matters that much. And I know beekeepers that have a success both ways. So for example, some beekeepers, especially maybe in New Mexico, it would be a bigger deal because here in Southeast Texas, it's very humid. So I know some beekeepers that put a pan of water in their incubator to keep it more humid, and they have success doing that. A lot of times I try to run a pan full of water in my incubator, and then it always at some point dries out, and then I forget about it, and my queens seem to emerge at just the same rate. So I don't have a scientific study to cite on it. If you're raising cells, maybe that's something you'd want to keep an eye on for yourself.
Perhaps, yeah, especially here in New Mexico. Can you speak to the process you went through to get your education and what it took to set up your business?
Well, actually, I don't have a college degree. After I left Marla, I just kind of jumped right into queens and to beekeeping, but I do have a lot of experience in beekeeping world. And so I really went out of my way to work with beekeepers, get mentors, get experience with other beekeepers all over the country to learn from. And so through my entire career, I guess, I've always wanted to learn more and be the best beekeeper I can be. And I'm still trying to achieve that goal. So I think I've actually made a lot of sacrifices and also had a lot of fun traveling around and learning from as many beekeepers as I can about the ways that they run their business. So basically I can just steal all of these good ideas from all these beekeepers I've met and try to integrate it into my own system.
Well, it sounds wonderful. I'm thinking there's a book about this story, about the beginning and where you're at now. It would be a wonderful thing to read, all the details and I'm sure you got some great funny stories, some not so funny stories, and some episodes that maybe I don't know, maybe you don't want to relive them, but it would be certainly good entertainment. You might speak to, should I send my publisher your email address? Anyway.
Maybe after queen season, Steve.
Okay. Dorothy Morgan wants to know, do you sell your inseminated breeder queens?
I have sold a few, and that is my goal as Mahoney bees and queens. I'd really like to move more towards instrumental insemination. I do custom insemination for other beekeepers. So once I get my population stable, which is, it's getting more and more stable. Like I mentioned, my goal is 200 breeder colonies. And I've really seen it grow even in 3 years. So I look back at 3 years ago, and I think I started with 25 frame colonies. And this year I'm starting out with over 100 full-size colonies. And they look, a lot of them look really good. So I'm hoping to sell more and actually be able to advertise, maybe even by the summer or the fall of this year.
Great.
Yeah.
So Jim Lacey has got a couple questions to finish up here. Do you have any specific recommendations for queen raising or breeding here in New Mexico?
Any special recommendations?
Yeah, based on trying to raise queens here in New Mexico.
Well, I would encourage beekeepers in the summertime, once the wind and the blizzards are over in May or whenever that is, I would really encourage beekeepers to experiment with cells. I think they're kind of the underdog of the queen world. And it is something that is achievable for almost any beekeeper. And it's a really good way to exchange stock also. So if you're into bees, I would really encourage you to, by yourself or with a group of beekeepers, try to raise a few of your own and see how it goes and have fun with it.
I'm really glad that you mentioned wind in the spring, because I've wanted to get into queen rearing, and I have some gear and I've taken a class. But one of the problems I have in my location is that I watch hives that go queenless for whatever reason, raise queen cells, and then I see those cells looking good and the queen emerges and she never comes back. And it's happened over and over and over. And I have a good friend down the road who's got almost 20 hives, and we have to buy queens all the time. And so I keep thinking I could raise these wonderful virgins, but I don't know whether the birds here just pick them off or the winds, they can't find their way back, but it's been kind of frustrating.
Yeah, definitely the wind can impact mating. So you might consider trying to wait till a little later in the year.
You mean wait till there's no wind?
There is a reason why I don't live in New Mexico anymore. I wish I would love to live in New Mexico. For our business model, there's no way that we could raise that number of queens when we need them, which is February through April in New Mexico, unfortunately. So you just have to have a different model, or take your bees somewhere else, I guess.
Well, maybe to Hawaii.
Well, I don't know about that.
Okay, so let's see. Jim has also asked a question about queen insemination, but it's not clear from his question about whether maybe he said something about, is there a program slide for queen insemination? But I think he means, is there a good program that we could, beekeepers that are interested in the complexities of queen insemination, instrumental insemination?
If I'm not mistaken, I think Sue Kobe just updated her video series on queen insemination. So that would be a good place to start, is by looking at her videos.
Great.
And if it really is, if you're an experienced beekeeper and you have some experience raising queens already and you know how to graft, then there are some classes available. I offer classes to experienced beekeepers. And also Sue Kobe offers some classes to experienced beekeepers. But I would really encourage getting familiar with grafting, raising cells, and the technicalities of the cell raising process before you get into insemination.
Great. Let's see. One last question. Lori is asking, can you transfer swarm cells into queenless hives?
Yes, 100%. Yes, you can do that. But
Awesome.
You just have to, they can be hard to remove. So you just have to be careful when you're removing them. And just like you would, and it's hard to know what age they are without opening them, So you just want to make sure that you keep them upright and handle with care. And I've done that with success before and also with no success. So just play around with it, and because you never know, you could be transporting a cell that wasn't viable in the first place. Or maybe it was way too young, or you damaged it. But in theory, it's definitely something that could work.
Great, great. Okay, we had another question come in. What qualities are you breeding for? You mentioned the black gray color as one. Why are you breeding for color?
I'm breeding for color because it represents the carniolan subspecies, and it also is a sign to me that my breeding population is more pure, or that it is what it's supposed to be. So, and it's marketable, all of those three things, but it certainly is not the most important trait. I'm also selecting for gentleness, disease resistance, or at least low prevalence. And I look at, well, when all of those colonies, when the F1 satellite population ends up back in the larger breeding pool, we do mite shakes on all of them, and we do hygienic testing on all of them also. So in that way, it provides a really nice filter of selection for the entire outfit. And one really nice thing about our model, I think, is that it's always going to be changing because it's on a population level and not just a single hive. You're looking at, as a population, how are they doing? You know, how are they performing? How productive are they? And so each time your population gets better, it offers you another opportunity for more selection. So right now I'm trying to get up to 200 that I am really just in love with, and hopefully I'll get there. And once I have that, then I can go back to that population and filter it even further. So for example, I could do more mite counts, or more VSH counting, or, you know, 1 black stripe instead of 3, or whatever selection protocol you were to choose.
A super race.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to finish up now, Megan, but I wanted to thank you. This has been great. I think you've inspired some bee breeding here in New Mexico. I know more than I knew, certainly when we started today. And I want to thank you. And it's so nice to have you back here with us in New Mexico. There's several people are asking for contact information. So what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Mahoney beesandqueens@gmail.com.
Excellent.
That's
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you guys. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.